All right, everybody. What we're about to get into is Peter Thiel, one of the co-founders and executive chairman of Palantir, in 2012, debating the then CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt. And it's a 4-minute clip, and I wanted to play this clip for a couple of reasons. Number one, Thiel was saying some interesting stuff to Google back then, and a lot of it has kind of come true to an extent. I mean, I'll argue the bear and bull case of what he was saying in terms of how truthful it was or how much happened in the real world today, but it was a very interesting conversation in terms of what he was telling Google about the nature of innovation and what they're doing for the world. That's the first reason I want to show it. The second reason I want to show it is because Palantir, the bull case for a lot of the shareholders currently at a $30 billion market cap. No, it's not $300 billion. It's not $3 trillion. We're early. It's $30 billion. We're here. This is an early video. This video, one day might be watched by someone when the company's $300 billion, or one day might be watched by the company when the company's only $40 billion. We never know what's going to happen. But the point is, we're in the infancy of what Palantir can become. And Alex Karp and company have stated there's no reason the company can't be 20 times bigger than it is today. And by the way, when they said that, the market cap was even bigger than it is currently. And Alex Karp believes, and the company believes, this is going to be one of the most important software companies in the world. Now, either that's hoopla or they genuinely believe it. And when you look at a guy like Peter Thiel and his investing history, his background, the strategic decisions he's made with founder funds, his VC fund, his entire firm, their sort of philosophy around defense technology and even consumer startups. He was one of the first checks into Facebook. This is not a guy that tends to lose. And this is a guy, that 0 to 1 book is one of the most important books in business that you can ever read. The entire concept is, how can you build a monopoly? How can you build something where you have no competition against? Because if you have no competition against it, then you can go from 0 to 1. You can actually take a product, an idea, to the entire world, because no one's going to stop you, because no one can do it better than you, because they can't build what you have built, because it's actually original. You've actually innovated. That is the mantra of Palantir. And for those that are invested in the company, for those that understand it, our bet is that what they have done is created a software that is so fundamentally unique, so transformational, so revolutionary. They're on the cutting edge of this stuff, that they've been able to establish relationships with the government. Their commercial partners want to work with them. The R&D they're able to do in the healthcare space can pay dividends to the point where they can get a $600 million NHS contract and manage 70 million people's healthcare data in the United Kingdom, because no one can do what Palantir can do. And if we're right, we're going to make a crap ton of money. If we're wrong, then we're not going to make that much money. And that is the fun of investing. We'll see what happens. Peter Thiel seems to have thought this through many, many years ago, and he kind of pointed out the problems with big technology companies that have continued to only get bigger since 2012, but he still points out a reasonable argument for some of the problem with those tech companies and what they haven't been able to do. And given Palantir's rate of innovation, which we'll talk about after this clip, you could imagine that Palantir's ability to innovate actually will lead them to become one of the most important technology companies in the world, because they're not sitting around resting on their laurels. Let's take a look at this clip.
New York Times did a major piece suggesting that, Apple doesn't account for the same kind of employment in the United States that General Motors did in the 1950s. And you make a similar case. Twitter, Facebook, great as they are, 140 characters is neat, but they don't employ a lot of people.
Well, they're all great companies,
they're profitable and
but they're not ones that are able to basically. But there's sort of the exception to the rule that we don't have enough innovation, so you have to.
Real quick before he continues, notice what Peter Thiel is saying. He was one of the first investors in Facebook. At this time, he still sat on the board of Facebook. He left the board in February 2022, and even then, he was saying, like, yeah, they're whatever, interesting companies. Because even he was like, at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of ads because people are scrolling through memes. Like, that's what social media is, right? I'm being facetious here, but he was basically downplaying it to that extent, because he's talking about real innovation, which I think Palantir was doing in 2012 in terms of building out their products. And that's why he had a little bit more of a unique insight into what innovation looks like in the tech space.
You have to avoid confusing the specific and the general. Google is a great company. It has 30,000 people. They have, or 20,000, whatever the numbers. They have pretty safe jobs. On the other hand, Google also has 30, 40, 50 billion in cash. It has no idea how to invest that money in technology effectively. And so it prefers getting 0% interest from Mr. Bernanke. Effectively, the cash sort of gets burned away over time through inflation, because there are no ideas that Google has on how to spend the money.
That's insane, bro. And this is when interest rates were still near zero in 2012, right? So he's basically like, you don't know what you're doing with your money. Inflation's going to burn it away. You're not actually investing it. You're not actually putting your capital. Ironically, Palantir, now that they're sitting on $3 billion of cash, $1.5 billion is in short-term treasuries. So they're making $17 million off of that. So like at least Palantir's getting some money off their cash.
Let me see if I can help Peter answer your question. The core problem we have going forward, since I think we're supposed to talk about the future, is that you have two forces that are going to govern much of what's going to happen in the future. The first is globalization, which we're not going to repeal, and the second one is automation.
He was kind of wrong about that. Globalization, we are starting to get de-globalized, and this actually even points more into the Palantir bull case that I'll get into. But think about that. In 2012, the CEO of Google saying we're not going to repeal globalization. That is not true. What companies are left in Russia? The geopolitical dynamics of this world has led us to de-globalize, which is where Google becomes less valuable because not everyone's searching anymore. And you got to have platforms that are more valuable in terms of dealing with the deglobalization that is happening as a result of countries threatening other countries and their sovereignty.
Which we're not going to repeal. And if you look, these problems are ultimately cast in political systems in the West, and I think eventually globally. The first is globalization, which we're not going to repeal, and the second one is automation, which we're not going to repeal. And if you look, these problems are ultimately cast in political systems in the West, and I think eventually globally, as jobs problems. And the solution to jobs problems, in my view, is education, right? Education at many levels in many different ways, which we can discuss. I don't see another solution to this. It's absolutely true, as Peter says, that these gems, if you will, and you were nice enough to call those companies, describe them so well, they're not employing enough people. So how
but
do
you have $50 billion at Google. Why don't you spend it on doing more in tech? Or are you out of ideas? And it's not. And I think Google does more than most companies. You're trying to do things with self-driving cars and supposedly with asteroid mining, although maybe that's just part of the propaganda ministry. And you're doing more than Microsoft or Apple or a lot of these other companies. Amazon's the only one, in my mind, of the big tech companies that's actually reinvesting all its money, that has enough of a vision of the future that they're actually able to reinvest all their profits.
They make less profit than Google does.
But if we're living in an accelerating technological world and you have 0% interest rates in the background, you should be able to invest all of your money in things that will return it many times over.
I'm gonna keep letting him cook. All right, I'm gonna let him cook. But goodness, I mean, that's an incredible point. This is why this guy doesn't fucking lose, bro. This guy understands what he's talking about. We are in rapid technological acceleration. And that was in 2012. Now in 2023 with AI, it's like even crazier. But that was in 2012. He's saying you have 0% interest rates. You're not getting any return on that capital. It's sitting in the bank, eroding to inflation. Why aren't you putting it into ideas? Why aren't you innovating for the future? It's not even a question about jobs. It's about how can you secure the future vision, not only of the company, but of the trajectory of growth, of like an overarching vision of the future, which is he's giving credit to Amazon. This is back when AWS was getting ramped up and they were really getting ready to do what they needed to do back in 2012, and 2014 to 2019 is when they had their amazing run. He's saying, Google, are you out of ideas? And quite frankly, and this is what I'm going to get into a little bit later, what has Google done since 2012? They've done GCP, they've done cloud, but they were late to cloud, and they just turned profitable last quarter after doing cloud for like 4 years, right? AWS beat everybody, and then Azure kind of came in second place. What else has been done? Self-driving cars, not really, right? That's Tesla's game. I mean, like Tesla's going to actually win that. Social media, no, they haven't created Twitter. The Google Plus was a failure. YouTube is amazing, but it's like, all right, you got YouTube. So we'll get more into it, but like, really, what have they done?
The fact that you're out of ideas, maybe it's a political problem. The government's outlawed things, but it still is a problem.
I'm going to go to the audience very soon, but I want you to have the opportunity to address your paucity of investments.
I think I'll just let his statement stand.
You don't want to address the cash hoard that you do not have, that your company does not have the creativity to spend, to invest. Excuse me.
What you discover in running these companies is that there are limits that are not cash. And there are limits of recruiting, limits of real estate, limits of regulatory limits, as Peter...
Oh, this is nonsense, in my opinion. I mean, like, really? Real estate is the limit for innovation? You don't have an office building, so you can't innovate? It's like, you're Google. You can get any landlord in America or across the world will give you a lease on favorable terms tomorrow. It's an idea problem. I don't think it's a real estate problem.
points out, there are many, many such limits, and anything that we can do to reduce those limits is a good idea.
But then the intellectually honest thing to do would be to say that Google is no longer a technology company, and that it's basically a search engine. The search technology was developed a decade ago. It's a bet that there will be no one else who will come up with a better search technology. So you invest in Google because you're betting against technological innovation in search, and it's like a bank that generates enormous cash flows every year, but you can't issue a dividend because the day you take that $30 billion and send it back to people, you're admitting that you're no longer a technology company. That's why Microsoft can't return its money. That's why all these companies are building up hoards of cash because they don't know what to do with it, but they don't want to admit they're no longer tech companies.
Briefly, and then we're going to go to the...
So the brief rebuttal is, Chrome is now the #1 browser in the world. The platform for enterprise innovation on top of Google is, I think, phenomenal. The rate at which people are using Google to redo the way their businesses work. There's many.
He's talking about Google Sheets, Gmail, all that stuff, Google Docs.
Many examples of business innovation that Peter's not choosing.
And of Google's investment.
Okay, so that's the end of the clip. Think about how interesting Peter Thiel's comments were near the end of the clip, where he's talking about this concept of it's basically a bank generating a crap ton of cash flows. You can't pay the shareholders a dividend because then you would be admitting you don't have any more growth. But it's a search engine with search technology from 10 years ago, which, Peter was right. And his argument was you're basically betting that no one will innovate in search. And ChatGPT is now here. And one of the arguments against Google is like, look, it's not that ChatGPT is going to take away your entire market. It's that pay-per-click advertising, the thing that generates, I don't know, what is it, like $70 to $90 billion of revenue per year for this company, is going away. And not that it's going away immediately, but that if it's not going to grow because people are just not going to be used to clicking on these little links, they're going to want answers immediately. And yeah, you can put some ads within your generative AI answers, but is it really going to be as effective as the pay-per-click model that you've had for 2 decades and you've just been able to build an entire $1 trillion company off of? If it's not going to grow as much as it was going to grow in the past, then shareholders are not going to value the company in a more positive sense, right? They're going to be like, well, this is decreasing growth. Why should I be paying $1.xyz trillion of value for this company if it's not growing, especially if search, which is their biggest cash cow, is not growing? So this is in 2012. Peter Thiel was like, hey, I don't think you guys are a tech company anymore, which, is kind of absurd to say, but he's saying it in a more bombastic notion because his argument is like, what technology are you building? What are you doing with the tech? And so over the past 10 years, yes, Google has done a lot of amazing things with tech, but its core business is still search. They rejected Project Maven by the United States federal government. They have rejected to work in the defense technology space because of internal politics within the company. And so when you look at a company like Palantir in comparison to a company like Google, my first kind of thought here is the guy that's leading Palantir, that in 2012 didn't even have a commercial product, was thinking what the world would be like 10 years from now. And now you've got Palantir's AIP. Now you've got Palantir Foundry. This is a man who created PayPal, sold it, and basically said, what if the fraud mitigation data technology that they created could be used for the government, and then figured out a way to build an entire company that would be working with the government to do data protection, data analysis, all this stuff based on the concept that he came up with at a financial services company. It takes a little bit of 0 to 1. It takes a little bit of innovation to think like that. And in 2012, you could imagine that Palantir was like, hey, the world is going towards this, because every time Alex Karp talks, he's like, well, we're doing something for companies that they don't realize, but 5 years in the future, they will know that they have this problem, and we will be there to solve it because we're building solutions for that right now. I would imagine in 2012, Peter Thiel and company were like, hey, this is where the world's going to be in 10 years. There's going to be an absurd amount of data. Data will be the oil. It won't just be, people's attention. It will be the data that is collected off of that. And the monetization of that attention eventually will dissipate because people will just become tired of Facebook and Google and Amazon taking all their data and then doing everything they need to do. What will become the future will be enterprises, governments, organizations trying to figure out how can we use this data to be more effective, to stop climate change, to have an energy revolution, to improve healthcare, to create our supply chains, our logistics, to be able to protect the nuclear weapons. Palantir has a deal with the nuclear administration for $90 million. Like, how many different things could we do if we have a better understanding of our data, if we have an ontology, if we have a backend architecture that allows us to have simultaneous deployments, which is the Apollo platform? Like, what could be done? What could be done on the warfield? What could be done on the battlefield? What could happen if the world deglobalizes and we need to actually save people from dying, and we need mission critical software, and we need geospatial intelligence? All of this stuff is tech. It's innovative, and it's happening at Palantir because they thought about it 10 years ago. And the reason I wanted to do this is because it doesn't seem like Google's really cared to think about that type of stuff, because the core cash cow was search. And I don't know if search is going away, but it's just interesting to look at one of the co-founders of one of the most innovative tech companies in the world in Palantir telling the biggest top dog in 2012 that you guys aren't innovating, you don't know what to do. And 10 years later, they've done some stuff. But in terms of what Palantir is doing, I don't see Google being the innovative top dog here. Obviously, they've done stuff, but I don't see them at the level of innovation of Palantir. And now the only question is the market opportunity big enough for Palantir to go capture it? If it is, then how big can Palantir become? Does it become $1 trillion? Probably not, because consumer-facing products, that's, Palantir doesn't have that. But can it become a very big company that does a lot of stuff for a lot of customers across the world? I think it can. And if it does, then it speaks to what true innovation looks like, and kind of not resting on your laurels and actually going from 0 to 1. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.